So understanding that like the average 8-year-old child, like when we look at the standard American diet and every nutrition fact panel says 2,000 calorie a day diet, there's no real science behind that. That was a guess. Yeah. Now, when you start thinking about the fact that most adults are eating less than that to lose weight, in their mind, you may have a mom that's like, well, I eat 1,500 calories a day to lose weight, and my child eats less than I do. It makes sense in their brain because it's a tiny little human. But then you realize that this child is not getting nearly enough nutrients because they are sort of lumped in with the nutritional goings on of the adults, you know?
Welcome back to the Running Wine Mom podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Cieslinski, aka the Running Wine Mom. Today, buckle up because we have a guest who is about to shake up everything you thought you knew about nutrition, fitness, and how we talk to our kids about food. He's a musician turned nutrition expert, the creator of Clovis, a fearless mythbuster in the wellness space, and the author of books like How to Talk to Your Kids About Weight and The Ultimate Guide to Macros for Kids. I mean, does it get any better than that? We're talking real, no BS truths about health, debunking the biggest food myths, and figuring out how real people, especially busy parents, can make choices without losing their sanity. So without further ado, let's welcome Justin Nault. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Excited to talk to you today. And before we get into the nitty gritty of nutrition, we start each episode with our wine, and win of the week segment. That is where we share our favorite bottle of wine, then about something that's been bothering us and celebrate our recent victories. So grab a glass, take a deep breath, and let's get started. So Justin, what is your WIN of the week?
WIN. Okay, that would be, I have been contacted by the Make America Healthy Again movement to be a part of their upcoming documentary films. So I've done one interview for that already, and then I will be flying out to Utah next week to go even further. So I'm going to be featured in multiple films, and that will probably come with some appearances on some very popular talk shows and things of that nature. So it's going to be pretty cool in the next couple months.
That's wonderful. So how did that all come about?
That was a crazy series of synchronistic events. I mean, we'll get into this, especially when we talk about childhood nutrition, but I got into this because of childhood nutrition and from a completely different career path. So the last 8, close to 9 years now, I've been essentially saying what is the current MAHA movement. All of those talking points, seed oils, artificial flavorings and sweeteners, dyes, we're poisoning our children, glyphosate, the whole thing, for 8 or 9 years. So what ended up happening was the director had just received multiple messages from multiple people saying, hey, this is the guy. He's been doing this for a long time, and he can break things down in a really simple way that will help these films. So and I just got a random call on a Tuesday night. Can you film 3 days from now? I said, all right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what's your wine of the week?
My wine of the week. Oof. Probably just the amount of pessimism, I think, happening right now in every aspect of everything. Like if you really start to track humanity over time, it's better than ever before on nearly every marker. But it's just this, on every corner of the internet, the sky is falling, you know? And I thought about this actually when I was approached for this documentary, because I'm not a political guy. Like I don't pay attention to politics. I'm not interested. I think it's like theater that's a distraction from, you know, and I just could not be less interested in it. And I had this conversation with my fiance, like, you know, there's a risk that I do this documentary and like 100 million people hate me for no reason, just because I'm part of that thing. Right. So that's really what I'm like, man, just the amount of pessimism and divisiveness and all these things, I just don't see it as necessary.
Yeah. And I always tell, because I mean, I have to, on my like stories, it's like nonstop of both sides. Like, this is terrible, that is terrible. And, you know, what I say to some of my friends are really just so anxious over things that haven't happened, or maybe they are, but I like, maybe it's naive of me and maybe I'm just very lucky to be able to say this, but I just say like, turn it off and look in your house. What's happening in your home? And if everything is happy, and what can you do in your home to make it better? And like, let's start there rather than being concerned about what's happening outside of your doors, because and I know that's important to do, but like it's a way to relieve the stress, in my opinion. And that's totally kind of like politics I feel the same way as you. I'm like, I don't know. I just like want to live a happy life and enjoy.
Yeah. There was an amazing quote from a comedian, said something like, somewhere in the wilderness, there's a man sitting by a waterfall, completely content and unaware that he's supposed to be angry and scared right now.
Yeah. Yes, that's really true. So true. So what, as I know in nutrition, maybe you're not into wine, but if you have a wine or a drink of the week, what is that?
Yeah. So anytime somebody asks me about wine, I refer them to my friends at Dry Farm Wines. So Dry Farm Wines is basically like a very low sugar, slightly lower alcohol content, biodynamic wine company, and they ship it right to your door. I don't
Wow.
drink much anymore, but I certainly used to. I had a 15-year music career. And yeah, so Dry Farm Wines was my go-to when I started my health and wellness journey and transitioning out of alcohol and just trying to make better decisions was Dry Farm Wines. I love them.
Cool. I'm going to have to check them out. So I always like to ask my guests, what is one significant challenge you've successfully navigated shaping your journey to where you are today?
Oh, wow. Too many to mention. There's so many paths, right? There's the entrepreneurial path of like insane amounts of money lost and bad business deals and those kinds of things. But really, I think the hardest things that I've ever done in terms of overcoming things is for me, the last 10 years has been a journey of self-love and understanding that nearly all unhappiness stems from a place of self-love or what I call conditional self-love, right? It's like the only
Mhm.
way we love ourselves is if we are showing up in some magical way that we're supposed to. That's really been from where I was 10 years ago to now at 38 years old, the amount that I love myself is probably the most significant thing that I've ever overcome and the thing that I'm probably most proud of.
I love that. And it's so important. And I feel the same way as I age. I love myself more and more. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I wish I could just like hug my 21-year-old self and be like, just like be okay with what's happening right now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So the running wine mom, we talk a little fitness. What's your favorite way to stay active?
Oh, wow. Probably my favorite way is jujitsu, I would say. Really martial arts of any kind. I was hitting the heavy bag earlier today. I have a heavy bag out in my backyard and did a cold plunge today, some cycling. But yeah, I've always been a martial artist for many years, but I've been into everything, CrossFit, powerlifting. I'm certified in kettlebells. I
Wow.
love functional patterns, the modality I found recently called functional patterns that has been tremendous for just kind of shoring up some of the aches and pains from my what I call my meathead years in my 20s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think martial arts is probably my favorite if I had to pick.
Yeah. We want to get our kids into that when they're just a little bit older. But my husband, that's like the one thing he's like, I definitely want to get them into that. And I never did it growing up. So, but I thought, sure, let's do it. I
Oh yeah,
heard
yeah.
great things.
I think that's a great idea. We have a daughter on the way, and I'm assuming she's going to end up in some martial arts for sure.
I love that. So, how do you think that your working out relates to your mental health?
Oh yeah, I mean, one, I mean, there's definitive studies to prove the different chemicals that are released in your brain, the runner's high, and these kinds of things. Now, I do think there's a fine line there. I think a lot of people, when they're getting things like runner's high, there's also a very significant catecholamine spike. Your stress hormones are through the roof
Hmm.
doing specific
Right.
types of exercise, or when we're doing things like fasted, high intensity interval training and just like making it as extreme as possible. But I really think there is something to, and functional patterns talks a lot about this, is your fascial system, like the myofascial structure of your body plays into human metabolism and the way that you generate ATP and create energy in the body. Like it's all, we can't, again, like if we turn to like reductionist science, right? We can't just parse out different parts of the body. Like the muscle has nothing to
Right.
do with the metabolism and the metabolism has nothing to do with the brain. Like it just doesn't function that way. And really, when you think of, I mean, whether or not people believe in evolution, but like the way that the human body moves by default, we're actually structured and designed in a way that warrants movement. So a
Hmm.
lot of the aches and pains and the issues I think people deal with are from the sedentary lifestyles that we have today. Of, I actually, speaking of kids, I actually helped fund a nonprofit called Stand Up Kids that
Okay.
flips public school classrooms from seated desks to standing desks with widget
Mm.
bars at the feet, so the kids can kind of move their feet and just get that sort of energy out and not just put them planted in the seats. I think movement is critical for mental health for sure.
Totally agree. And I am also a health and phys ed teacher at the high school level. So I am everything you're saying. I wish that we could have the standing desks because
Yeah.
it's been, I mean, over the last like 10 years, seeing the change of kids wanting to move and like just so many different things, to kind of go into the mental health of it too, of even socializing in phys ed class is very
Mm,
interesting. Like kids would rather just, and I don't allow cell phones in my class at all. Like they're not out. Even like when they're walking, I'm like, if you want to listen to music, you can listen to it, but put your phone down where it's not going to be out. And they choose to not talk to people over and just,
yeah.
it's weird. And I wish in the other classes, that they could be standing and moving too, because sometimes my 40 minutes is the only movement that they have of the day and they need it.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I remember, I think it was the 4 Hour Work Week, but it was one of Tim Ferriss's books where he was talking about there were studies done on memory and like
Hmm.
studying new information and using things like an under desk, just like pedaling under your desk, or like I have a walking pad over here. So I work at a
Right.
standing desk and I walk a lot. And he was talking about just the enhancement in memory and retention for things that you're learning when your body's actually moving. It's really interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that I had looked into a while ago, I haven't looked into it recently, but it was having basically a recess class at like before school started and how it gets the kids' brains, more focused and how it enhances learning. And we have our seventh graders first period, and that's something that we were outside getting them moving in whatever weather it is and trying to get them ready for the day to be less stressed and more focused,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
hopefully
That's
it's
awesome.
working.
Cool.
So you are going to become a parent. Tell us about your family.
Yeah, so it's me and my fiance living together now, and we had our plans was to get married this spring, and then hello, here we go. So she's
Cheers, have a baby.
exactly, yeah, yeah. Our baby's due July 19th as it stands right now. Super excited about, and it's been really fun for me because my whole journey to being a health and wellness influencer, I guess if we use that term, really came from childhood nutrition and the birth of my niece who was born terminally disabled. And that's what brought me here. And I had a program called Clovis Kids where I was helping parents learn how to feed their children, how to make it not such a tug of war nightmare when you're changing the food in the house and all these different things. So it's been really fun for me to watch this in real time. Like that was the number, a lot of feedback that I got when I was doing Clovis Kids is like, oh, you'll understand once you become a parent. And I totally get that, right? It's like my fiance eats perfectly. I do not know any humans that have a cleaner diet than we have. My entire brand is built on this. And still, it was like first trimester, she was so nauseous. She ended up like basically bedridden. We're like, oh my goodness, like what can she actually get down? What can she actually eat? Right. And it was like the Mike Tyson quote, like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, you know?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So we've been dealing with that a bit, but now that we're in second trimester, she's doing great and she's eating incredibly well. Like everything it's been fantastic, but it's been a wild learning experience.
Yeah, and it will keep on learning because
Mhm.
I read every book and prepare. I'm such a like type A preparer, and then it's
Yeah.
like and then you'll have one and you'll be like, okay, I got it, and you'll have your second, and then you're like, this is a whole new child. What the heck?
Right. Right. Totally. Yeah.
So what do you hope that your parenting style will be?
Well, I want to make sure that I'm providing an incredibly safe structure for the child to have as much freedom as possible is really the way that I'm trying to sort this out, right? The children need to understand boundaries, especially having a daughter. She's going to be, I'm sure she's going to be testing the masculine structure of the household, all these different things, the boundaries that children actually need to feel really safe. But
Hmm.
then also giving as much freedom as possible to explore the interests that she's interested in, right? When I look back over my life, I was put into gifted programs when I was very young, and it just immediately destroyed my love of learning. I hated it. I was like, I'm put in a different room than all the other kids, and they're making me read these books. I was in third grade with like an eighth grade reading level or something, and it just like the whole experience was just like a no for me.
Hmm.
And that led to a lot of good things because it made me very entrepreneurial and I couldn't be bothered with school as I got older. And then in my early 20s I fell in love with reading again, reading things that I wanted to read, not things that were forced
Hmm.
upon me. So I really just want to create an environment where she has access to as many things as she wants to have access to, and we see what her little personality decides is her way.
Yeah, that will be so fun. And I am sure that you've gotten a lot of parenting advice so far. Has there been anything that stuck out to you that you are going to take with you into parenting?
I think the biggest thing is that we're having the discussions around what does potential schooling look like, because we know it's not going to be traditional public school, right? We have friends that have children in Acton Academy, and we've looked into Montessori, and we've looked into like this. I can't remember what it's called. It's like outdoor schooling or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways of doing the schooling thing now. So that's really what I'm more curious to dive into and learn a lot more about. I don't know a whole lot about the different modalities right now, but that's probably the biggest question mark for me. And talking to a lot of really amazing people who have amazing children who I've spent a lot of time around and just kind of looking like, okay, this is an Acton Academy kid. Pretty cool. I'm going to bookmark that,
Right.
and just trying to figure out what direction we want to go with that.
And it's so hard because I mean, my daughter, this is her first year of preschool and she does 2 full days a week. And so many people are like, we put our kids 2 years of 5 full days of preschool. And if that's what anyone chooses to do, like that's great. But we just knew like the stuff we're doing outside of school is something that we really, with the way that my husband's schedule is, he's home a lot during the week and we're like, we want to kind of do it the way that we like out a lot of outside stuff and movement. And at that age, all you need is really play and socialization. So if that's what they're
Yeah.
doing, then instead of being like stuck in a classroom for 7 hours for, 12 years. But yeah, well, that will be great.
Yeah.
All right. So now let's get into you. You, as you said, kind of started off as a musician, which is a very busy, maybe not so healthy all the time lifestyle. You're not getting a well-rounded, you know, probably diet and sleep, or, maybe you're trying your best. But now you are a health and wellness expert. What was kind of the moment that you made to pivot from music to nutrition?
Yeah, that came in my late 20s. And my whole story, everything for me relates back to childhood nutrition because I was born in 86, grew up in the 90s with a 100% ultra processed diet. And this, like, my dad grew up on welfare and then became a very successful man. He had 300 employees, this big company. And I look back now at like the marketing machine that is big food, where like it was a sign of affluence to have brand name ultra processed junk food in your house. It's like we had real strawberry Pop Tarts and cinnamon toast crunch, And as a result, I went into high school almost 200 pounds, 7 inches shorter than I am today. I was like 5'2" and almost 200 pounds. I was a fat kid, as they called it then, or not politically correct term.
Yeah.
And I had tremendous body dysmorphia because I grew up in the era of action movie heroes like Sylvester Stallone. So I started lifting weights at age 15 and just punishing my body as much as I could. 2 hours a day, lifting weights, running on a treadmill, just like I will punish this body skinny. It was all I cared about. So reading Muscle and Fitness magazine, it was my Bible. And then I ended up with a career as a professional musician. I started getting paid for music when I was 17 in my hometown. Went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, moved out to Nashville. Next thing I know, I'm in my 20s. I'm playing 300 shows a year. I had a reality TV show on ABC by the time I was 25. So it was like this, you take this little kid with body dysmorphia and just put him under spotlights near 100% of the
Best
time.
thing.
Yeah. So, by the end of my music career, I was drinking 6 nights a week. I was partying like a literal rock star. And during the day, just savagely punishing my body, whatever I could do. If I didn't have time, it was P90X in my living room. If I had time, it was CrossFit 2-a-days. I was training jujitsu. I was boxing. I was doing everything. Powerlifting, ridiculous amounts of weight for no reason. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I discovered the paleo diet. And I did my first ever paleo reset and just started dropping body fat, like near what felt effortless compared to the other things I had been doing. And I was like, this is a cheat code. What is happening here? And I was doing pretty well in the music industry at that point. So my days were my own. I had a lot of time. And I actually became a nutritional therapist as a hobby once I learned about epigenetics and what they are. And I was like, how can I impact my genetics in a way that favors the body that I want to have? For me, it was like 100% aesthetics. I'm in this for the aesthetics. How do I keep this 6-pack year round? That was it, right? Universally, right around that time, my niece Savannah was born terminally disabled, and she was having over 300 seizures a day. She was immediately put into the pediatric ICU within days of life. And within weeks of life, she was given less than 3 years to live. And she was put on something called a G-tube because she couldn't eat or drink. So they install a G-tube in her belly and they feed her through this feeding tube. And what they do with children having seizures is they assume epilepsy. Now, she had not been diagnosed epileptic, but they assume epilepsy and they treat them with the ketogenic diet. So this was my first introduction to the ketogenic diet in a mainstream setting, a mainstream medical setting. This is what it's used for. Now, they're in full control of this baby's diet. So they put her on a keto diet using a baby formula. This is a baby formula called KetoCal. It's made by Danone, which is one of the biggest food companies in the world. And I decided to check the ingredients on this KetoCal. And it's high fat, low carb, which is technically keto, but mainstream medicine doesn't pay attention to quality. So all of that fat content was hydrogenated vegetable oils. Then we have, cornstarch and sugar and all these different synthetic vitamins that are not the usable forms. And I was like, this is sludge. So I brought it to the attention of a neurologist at the time, and he looked at the bottle and looked at me and said, I never thought to check that. And I
That's
could tell that I
crazy.
kind of, yeah, I kind of caught him off guard. And this is a perfectly amazing human being who was like trying to help my family, you know?
Right.
And just to see his reaction of like having this like, oh, wait a second, you know? And
Yeah.
we had this weird moment that I now call my sort of cliche Matrix red pill moment, where I was like, nobody's coming to save us. If they're
No.
willing to put a big food product like this that's toxic sludge that our tax dollars are paying for, mind you, and pump it into the belly of a dying child when they actually don't even have a diagnosis for this child yet,
Right.
what are they doing to the grown-ups, you know?
Yeah. Seriously.
And that was it. I went on a tear. I actually ended up making a baby formula in my kitchen using food dehydrators and food processors and paleo superfoods. That later became the first product I ever sold on the internet, called the Perfect Paleo Powder. I talked to some friends who were biochemists and had them tell me which textbooks to buy to learn biology and biochemistry, human metabolism. And I just spent 6 years down these rabbit holes and learning the truth about mainstream medicine and big food and corruption and the government and all this stuff. And along the way, I started doing Facebook Lives and just sharing my thoughts with people. And now, you know, it's 650,000 people, and I'm here with you and have all these crazy things going on, and thousands of lives transformed along the way.
I was born in 86 too. So as you're talking about all of this, like I never thought of it actually from a male's perspective, because we as females, you have all the like Cosmo magazines and like you're looking at like the heroin chic age where like if you had an
Yeah.
ounce of fat on your body, you were very overweight.
Yeah. Nicole Richie and
So
Paris Hilton all day.
yeah, like I definitely relate to you partied hard and then you just worked out all day. But we were also taught trust your doctor. And as you're saying all that, it's like, yeah, you trust that the doctor knows what's best for, like you said, a dying child. Like, why wouldn't they? And so many people don't question and look into it. So that is just an unfortunate situation that truly seems to have turned into something just wonderful for you to be able to go and spread that word.
Yeah.
So from this, you built Clovis. You built it from the ground up. When you first started, did you have any idea it would become such a big thing?
No. I mean, the only way I can answer that is a definitive no. I just was
Right.
like, I was sitting at my kitchen table. I had seen a friend of mine from music school who went live, and she was just kind of like sharing her thoughts. She had a glass of wine, actually. She was like, I had a
Yeah.
glass of wine, and she's just sipping wine and like talking to her friends. And I text her and was like, you can just like go live and like talk shit. She was like, 100%, you could do that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I tried it, and I asked people if they had any questions about health and wellness. I remember the first episode I did, I have like over 115 AMAs. I did one every week for 115 weeks straight. Is how the brand started. These Ask Me Anything episodes. And the first one was like, someone asked me about dairy, and I introduced them to the concept of A1 versus A2 dairy. And when I realized that most people didn't know there was an A1 and an A2 dairy, it was kind of this light bulb moment for me where I was like, okay, I think I've gone down enough rabbit holes where what I consider to be common knowledge is absolutely not common knowledge.
Yes, yes. And I totally can relate because being, when health and phys ed is like, or, like I'm obviously the teacher, I'm constantly learning and like, and similar to your mindset of like, this is all you're thinking about all day long. You're like, well, what I know is like, this is basic. People know
Yeah,
this. And it's
yeah,
like, no, they don't. No, they don't.
totally. Yeah, it's crazy now because I also coach entrepreneurs. Like I help influencers get to their first $10,000 month and beyond, which is like a whole separate program from health and wellness. But it's that I'm like, listen, what are you passionate about? Because I guarantee you everybody has a depth of knowledge on some topic that other people want to know about. They just don't think that that could ever be true. They're like,
Right.
no, this is
Yeah.
just like this thing that I learned on the side or whatever. No, you're an expert about something and somebody wants that information. So
Yeah.
it was a crazy experience. And then what was really exciting is like you touched on this for a moment a few minutes ago with like the gender thing too, is it was very interesting to me because I was like kind of a body dysmorphic disordered eating guy through the lens of like my muscles need to be bigger and I need to have less body
Hmm.
fat. I have to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And kind of organically, because I wasn't doing any paid traffic, so organically my demographic ended up about 85% women, most of whom were middle-aged moms, most of whom had never stepped foot inside of a gym. They certainly weren't
Hmm.
CrossFitters, or they were mostly sedentary, like very clinically obese women. And I was trying to figure out how that happened. And that was again how this puzzle unraveled even more, because I was just like, all right, I started a private Facebook group that now has almost 12,000 members, and just polled them. I was like, what drew you to my work? And they're like, well, you're the first essentially alpha male to stand beside us and be like, no, this is not your fault. I don't think you're
Right.
lying about your calories. I'm not going to gaslight you and say that you're just confused and you don't know how to track your macros or blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you the information you've been given is bad. The way they tell you your metabolism works is wrong. The theory of cellular biology that we teach in universities is wrong. And so they were like, you were the first person to really take this very masculine approach of sort of like a protector of like, no,
Hmm.
don't let the mainstream emotionally abuse you anymore. Let's talk
Right.
about what actually works. And it was really fun for me because I got to see both sides of the coin. Like you said, the way that you came up as a woman and the images that you were seeing that taught you this is what a woman is, this is how you get love, this is your worth is tied to how skinny you can be. And I dealt with it on my side as well. So it's been an amazing, just kind of a, you know, sort of like a, I don't know how to word it. Like it's like a societal thing that
Yeah.
I've gotten like a glimpse behind the curtain of how everyone's minds are working around this. And pretty much everyone was brought up with really unhealthy ideas of body image.
Right. And as you're saying, with people are, the women saying like, thank you for standing by us with the calories that you're counting. Like I remember in my 20s going to a nutritionist and I was like so strict with my fitness pal. Everything I was logging in, like scanning or whatever it was. And I was not losing like, and then on the my fitness pal, it's like, if you keep this up for like 4 weeks, you'll lose like, X amount of weight. And it was like the scale wasn't even budging for a week. And I was saying to my nutritionist, like, I don't understand. This is exactly, I'm following the plan. I mean, well, do you think you're like maybe snacking? Like, no, I'm not snacking. Well, do you think like you're having a little bit? No, I'm weighing everything out, like everything. And it was like, I was, like you just said, being gaslit. Like, and so now I don't even have that on my phone. I haven't for many, many years, but I'm like, I don't even want to go back to it because I'm so traumatized by my fitness pal
Yeah.
because the calories, it was just, I had to learn myself as well.
Yeah.
So as adults, we have our trauma and now we are both, I have a daughter, you're going to have a daughter. Nutrition in kids is so important. And again, the way that, as a female and male, we were brought up in from the 80s, eat low, calories and run is like basically what I was taught. And, I do not want that to be my son too. Obviously I don't want that, but I really, when I had a daughter, I was like, oh my gosh, like I really need to hone in on how I can make her have good body image and have a healthy relationship with food. So, one of your biggest missions is helping parents educate their kids about nutrition. What do you think the biggest mistake we're making when we're talking to kids about food is?
Yeah. So this is where my thoughts begin to get a bit controversial. And I am very familiar with people getting very mad at me online for things that I say, but I really think that we're seeing this with Make America Healthy Again, where people are now like, oh, wait, like RFK was literally able to get red dye banned because it's toxic.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this light bulb moment of like, oh, yeah, along with thousands of other ingredients that are allowed in our food that are banned in other countries. So we get into seed oils, we get into the red dyes, we get into artificial flavorings and sweeteners, pesticides, glyphosate, all this stuff, right? And what I would catch a lot of heat for online from parents is I teach a concept that is very simply food versus poison. Pop-Tart, poison. Steak, food. Banana, food. A Doritos,
Yeah.
poison, right? And that makes people very angry. And I have to say, honestly, I don't understand the anger. I understand that the entire food environment is stacked against you, that 90% of the grocery store is toxic. I understand that those things are sold to you as inexpensive. They are not. They're far more expensive than whole food, and I can explain why if you want to. But this is really, my child is going to absolutely be educated on things that appear to be food, but are actually toxic to their human metabolism. So, oh, you're fear mongering. You're making kids afraid of food. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm making kids afraid of poison. I'm not making them afraid of food. You wouldn't be saying this if I told you, oh, I taught my daughter that if you see a package with a skull and crossbones on it, don't put it in your mouth.
Right.
Nobody would have a problem with me saying that, but when I say that, God forbid, that the goldfish crackers that you're feeding your kid, you don't know what's in there. It's probably toxic. It's actually, we know it's toxic, right? I don't know if you saw the recent Girl Scout cookies test that came out. It was insane.
Yeah. Oh
You
God, my
know?
Thin Mints. I was so upset.
Exactly. So here you go, right? So it's like the wool has been pulled off of everyone's eyes of like, hey, these food manufacturing companies don't care what they're feeding you. They don't care
No.
about your health. And most of what you're consuming, if you're not eating single ingredient whole foods that exist in nature, you are probably being poisoned by metabolic toxins. And until you address that, you're going to struggle. And another example that I would say to moms, right, is I'd be like, you have a mom who's 35 years old, 5 feet tall, and 100. And I'm like, okay, listen, it's the middle of the night, and a professional UFC fighter kicks your door down and they go running for your kid's room. What are you going to do? You're going to fight them to the death. You will have no fear. You will attack that person. You'll gouge their eyes out, blah, 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 blah. But you're afraid to be at a social setting and tell somebody, hey, my kid doesn't eat that food. Don't give them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's your job to protect your children.
Yeah, you're so right. And to go a little bit on a tangent, but for you saying how, the food industry does not care about us. I was scrolling through Instagram yesterday and, GLP-1s are like a whole different, topic. But what the topic was is that junk food basically was on the decline because people are not eating as much as they did. But apparently these companies are trying to find ways for their food to bypass the GLP-1s.
Of course.
And I'm like, am I reading this? I mean, and again, I don't know what the truth, I didn't honestly read much into it, but it's something that I put in my mind. Like, I need to go look into this because like, what is that even like? But yeah, they just want to make, their money and they don't care how or who they're hurting. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you.
That's super important. Actually, I don't know if you have a couple minutes for us to go down this side.
Yeah.
But like, so I try to explain this to people. Every single food company has food engineers, which is a salaried position that's multiple six figures. Their only job is to make sure that flavors in food are engineered in a way where you eat as much as humanly possible, regardless of what it does to your health. And they do this by hijacking the umami taste bud center on your tongue. So your tongue has different taste buds. There's an umami flavor that's this kind of like salty, almost sweet, savory flavor that historically, throughout all of human history, would have sensed protein. And it does this by sensing animal blood. So the umami taste center in nature, the only thing that really tastes like that is animal blood. So what happens is your taste buds, they sense animal blood and they say, we have protein incoming. Then your metabolism gets to work. It does all the things it needs to do, releases all the correct blend of stomach acids and all these things to break down animal protein and then release amino acids into the bloodstream. The problem is all of these food engineers have made food in a way where it activates that same center of your taste buds. So the body says, okay, here comes protein. And then let's say Pringles, right? You eat an entire sleeve of Pringles and the body is saying, what is happening? We sensed protein and we have zero protein. We've just eaten 8,000 calories, but we have zero protein. So it sends a signal to the hypothalamus that tells you to eat more until the protein need is satiated. So the way that our hunger hormones work is protein is the most satiating macronutrient. It makes us feel the most full, right? So all of the most toxic hyperpalatable junk foods are hijacking this. They're literally hijacking your hypothalamus to make sure you eat more food. So this thing that you're talking about with GLP-1s is very real. Of course, if they see a stark decline in profits from their foods, they're going to come up with ways to hijack your brain, like hacking a computer.
Yeah.
And they're going to make sure that they can overcome these GLP-1s. And then on the flip side, the GLP-1 producers are already launching new drugs that you have to inject in yourself so that you don't lose muscle while you're starving yourself because you're taking a GLP-1 that makes your appetite go away. This is a huge problem and it's a race to the bottom. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. These things are all catastrophic for human health.
Oh my gosh. I could talk about this for hours, I swear. But what we are going to talk about is the next thing, which is a very sensitive topic. You have a book called How to Talk to Your Kids About Weight. It's such a tricky subject. Again, like I have had to work through my whole adult life about how I was talked to about my weight and eating, and how can parents really navigate this conversation without creating such guilt and shame around what their children, about their children's weight?
Yeah, it's an amazing question. And it's one of the most critically important. What we have to do is we have to help people understand, and this is for adults as well. Your worth as a human has nothing to do with a number on a scale. It has nothing to do with how big you are, nothing. But the primary thing that I do in the world, if I really break it down, is I call myself an architect of freedom. I'm trying to make sure that each and every person who ever works with me, one-on-one, group coaching, whatever, has as much freedom as possible. So the first thing I do is, like I just talked to you about, is I try to help you escape all of these systems that are keeping you stuck by trapping you and hijacking your brain. You probably want to free your brain first. Once we get rid of the poison and all the junk and all these things, you start creating more energy. your brain starts functioning differently, your cognitive function is better, you start to lose a little bit of weight, you can move your body in a better way, you can play with your kids, you can do hobbies that you like, whatever. And as we start to express more freedom, we're also talking about freedom from the physical restraints of an unhealthy body. If you are taking 12 prescription medications and you can't get up and down stairs, or you need a cane to walk, you're not a free person. You're not experiencing freedom, right? So freedom is the lens through which I like to explain health and wellness to children, because we're able to then talk about obese individuals in a way where we can ask the child questions.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every child alive today has seen, an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent who is restricted in their movement, who has trouble getting around, where the family kind of has to adjust and change things. Maybe there's a wheelchair involved, whatever. And we explain to the child that the more healthy decisions you make, the less likely you are to have those restrictions, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So
Yeah.
we're not insulting the person. We're not saying that, look at that person making terrible decisions,
Right.
or look at how yucky that is. We're not making comments about their appearance, nothing like that. We're just helping children see the fundamental truth that adults need to see as well. Food is medicine. The function of your body is based on the food that's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So with adults, I like to describe it like a computer. I have this MacBook Pro in front of me, and we all know that computers run on code. So as long as the code coming into the computer is perfect, that computer is going to do exactly what I expect it to do. Now, if we come along and we inject viruses and malware into that computer multiple times per day, every day for years, and the computer starts to malfunction, and we blame the computer. We say, this has a faulty keyboard, or its chips must be bad, or this screen, there's something wrong with it. That's what people do. They blame their own body. So we just have to create stories and analogies in a way that a child understands that my food choices are directly tied to how my body's going to function, not how my body's going to appear in space.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that the function over like the pounds on a scale. And that's so important for our kids to learn at such a young age, and hopefully take that in with them. So also another problem with our children, if they are in, a school, they have the school lunch system. If you could redesign it, what would the Justin Nault approved version look like for public school lunches, or I guess any school lunches?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, single ingredient whole foods. That's it.
Right.
I have a foods list, has over 110 foods to choose from. If somebody wants that, you can just DM me on Instagram at Justin Nault Official, and I'll send it to you.
Perfect.
We should be feeding children exactly as we're feeding adults. Human nutrition is basic. Human metabolism is basic. It's all the same fundamental principles, right? They're just smaller than we are, but they still have a human metabolism. So it's critically important to understand that the entire system, the public education system, the prison system, like every system that we have would change based on demand, right? We can change these systems overnight if the entire country all of a sudden is like, we only eat single ingredient whole foods. The speed at which food companies and grocery stores would adjust would absolutely blow your mind. They would spend billions of dollars to just give you more of what you want. It's a demand-based system.
Yeah.
And another way that I give parents sort of the motivation to do this stuff right and really focus on maybe I would probably send your child to school with a lunchbox.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would do that. There's really very few circumstances in which I could imagine, suggesting that parents let the school lunch program feed their children. And the reason for that is I use examples that should make parents very angry. There was a recent study that came out that was talking about how Lucky Charms are healthier than grass-fed beef, than eggs, all these different things. And this came out of a legitimate research university, right? So what happens, the reason why this happens is it seems almost comical. It's like, wait, who would believe this study that says Lucky Charms is better than beef and better than eggs? Just like the hijacking of the hypothalamus that the food engineers do, the food companies fund these studies. They may seem comical on their surface, but studies is how legislation gets passed and legislation gets changed in the country. So what happens is the politicians are now presented with a study. This came out of Tufts. Like, Tufts is no joke, right?
Yeah.
They're saying Tufts University has said that Lucky Charms is more healthy than meat and eggs. So legislation happens. Big food companies get a giant multi-billion-dollar win that all of a sudden every public school in the nation is going to carry Lucky Charms because Lucky Charms is a health food. So you see the way the corruption works. And I actually use the frequency of anger with parents to be like, hey, listen, Do you want to be a part of this system where science is being manipulated purposefully to make sure that more poison gets put into your kids? Or do you want to figure out the systems at home so that you can logistically send them to school with a homemade lunch every day?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you also talk about macros for kids, which reading for you, like, I mean, obviously I heard of them for adults, but I've really never heard anyone focus on them for kids. Why do they matter? And how can busy parents make macro friendly meals without losing their sanity?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And again, like if we're dealing with single ingredient whole foods, things become very simple because you can use slow cookers. Like we use the Instant Pot in my house every single day,
Hmm.
and we can just make a ton of ground beef all at once or a ton of chicken all
Right.
at once, and like really have these things put away in Tupperware where we can just hand it out to the kids as needed. We don't have
Right.
kids, but this is what parents could
That's
do.
what, yeah.
Yeah. So the thing about macros is there's so much dogma and propaganda around health and wellness for adults. Some people think it's keto. Some people think it's vegan.
Yeah.
Some people think it's carnivore, blah, blah, blah. And we pass that on to our kids. And as a result, our kids don't get balanced diets. So what I did
Yeah.
was I went through all of the literature studying indirect calorimetry, which is how many calories human bodies actually need to exist in the world. And I studied this in children. And then I started to study the perfect human food for babies, which is human breast milk. What is the macronutrient makeup of human breast milk? And then there are actual studies that I followed all the way from birth into teenage years of how macros should really adjust based on how the child is growing. So if you've ever done any bodybuilding, most bodybuilders are eating very high protein, very high carbohydrate, and usually pretty low fat. And then if they want to lean out a couple of weeks before a show, they'll do something like keto, right? So bodybuilders look no further than bodybuilders for how you can manipulate your body using macros. They're the best in the world at it, and they always have been, right? Children are tiny little bodybuilders. And the reason for that is they're constantly growing new tissue. They have to build bones, they have to build organs, they have to build biceps. So that all muscles, really, the whole muscular skeleton, the skeletal muscular system, they're building as children, right? So as adults, we really only want to eat in like this big caloric surplus and take in a bunch of carbs and protein if we're trying to build muscle. So maybe I'm trying to build biceps while my 8-year-old child is trying to build a bigger liver, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we think of them as smaller humans who just need what we need, but less. And this is how you end up with children who have like vegan parents that are being raised vegan and their teeth are falling out of their head, right? It's like it gets really gnarly. So understanding that like the average 8-year-old child, like when we look at the standard American diet and every nutrition fact panel says 2,000 calorie a day diet, there's no real science behind that. That was a
Yeah.
guess. So 2,000 calories a day is appropriate for about an 8-year-old child. Now, when you start thinking
Yeah.
about the fact that most adults are eating less than that to lose weight, in their mind, you may have a mom that's like, well, I eat 1,500 calories a day to lose weight, and my child eats less than I do. It makes sense in their brain because it's a tiny
Yeah.
little human. But then you realize that this child is not getting nearly enough nutrients because they are sort of lumped in with the nutritional
The
goings
adult.
on of the adults, you know? So this is what I try to help parents understand is like your children are like little bodybuilders. In some cases, they're going to need more food than you do. And
Right.
you definitely don't want to do things like restrict carbohydrates. So you have this system where everybody magically believes that sugar is bad for your kids. It isn't. Sugar isn't bad for any humans. There's no scientific literature anywhere that says sugar alone is harmful for humans. In any study that shows harm from sugar, the dietary fat in that study is polyunsaturated fats, essentially seed oil. So basically, sugar is getting blamed for a lot of what seed oils has done. And this has led to a world where I know so many parents where like their kids are on a zero sugar diet. And then they're amazed when their kid has like behavioral problems or won't listen to them or has crying fits or whatever. I'm like, you're depriving that child of the number one energy source of the human body.
Yeah.
So parents are just really confused about this stuff because of diet culture for grown-ups.
And it's very interesting. Yeah. I never thought of it. I mean, your kids are like growing, but you don't think of it as they're really actually growing. So that's a great breakdown for that. And now as you're talking, I'm like, all right, what can I do with my kids differently? My brain is moving a million miles a minute.
Yeah.
Um, and we talked so much about, you gave us so much information about kids, but moms really, and dads too, but we hear on the forefront, moms, they're notorious for putting themselves really last when it comes to health. If a mom listening right now could change one thing about whether it's her wellness or nutrition, what do you think would be the best advice to give them?
More controversial advice for your audience.
Love it.
Um,
I love it.
all the mamas out there, you need to immediately begin putting yourself first. And I try in the most empathetic way and the kindest way possible to help moms see. There's a term that I use for this called mommy martyrdom, where it becomes this story of I can't go to the gym because I don't have time, and I just have to eat what's convenient because I'm making meals for the family, and I got to take the kids to soccer practice, and I got to do the XYZ. And I just go back to being on an airplane, and you have to put your oxygen mask on first. So what's happening is what feels like selflessness to you is very selfish. And that's
Right.
very hard to hear. But what's happening is you're living your life in a way in which you are burning yourself out, and you cannot show up as the best version of yourself. So your kids are getting 60% of mommy, and your partner's getting 60% of partner. And you're going to have a worse mood. You're going to snap at those kids more. You're going to feel exhausted. And then after years of this, whether you like it or not, it's not going to be intentional. But after years of this, you're going to start to resent your family because your health has declined. You've gained a bunch of weight. You feel like crap. You're depressed. You're on an SSRI, whatever. And it's all because you refuse to put yourself first. The most selfless thing that you can do as a mom is set your life up in a way where you are operating at optimal. 100%. You are getting the sleep. You're getting optimal nutrition. You're nourishing your body. You're not restricting calories and skipping the gym and just having this terrible experience where you're letting your health decline rapidly while you're taking care of everybody else. It's not sustainable. And contrary to popular belief, it's actually quite selfish.
No, I totally agree with that. And my kids are young and I see so many moms in burnout and I have gotten a lot of people tell me like, wow, you're so good at putting yourself first. And like, sometimes I feel like it's a little bit of a backhanded comment, like, because I do prioritize going to the gym and I prioritize, my husband and my relationship, and our kids are so happy and they know that, like, after this interview, we're all, I'm going to take them to the gym with me and I'm going to work out. And guess what? They're going to go to a class at the gym too. But, it's like every day they come home. Are we going to go to kids club today? Yes, we are,
There you
because
go.
I'm going to get my workout in. And it is just like, I have more energy for making dinner and my stress is less. And it's very important, like you said, to put your oxygen mask on first. It's very important.
Well, and I love that you do that too, because one of my favorite quotes of all time is from a coach named Peter Crone. And Peter Crone says, your children will do a terrible job listening to you, and they will do an amazing job becoming you.
Yes.
So this frazzled, burnout, annoyed, snappy, not having a good time with your partner, this not prioritizing your health and wellness, that's going to get mirrored by your children. You are setting the standard that your children will live by, whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter what you tell them. It matters what
you're
they
right.
see.
Yeah. All right. I love that. So I guess I am doing the right thing.
You're crushing it. I love hearing that.
So changing the way we eat, it's just as much about mindset as it is about food. What's the biggest mental roadblock that you have seen people struggle with when going to change their diet?
The one that I shared with you was the biggest thing I've ever overcome, and that is the obstacle of self-love. And I can't really put it any more honestly than, like, if you are constantly putting toxic foods in your face, you don't love yourself.
Right.
And that's where we need to start, right? If I can flip the script where it becomes, if I have a client that's drinking 11 Pepsis a day and I say, hey, we should probably maybe think about cutting that out, they have the option of being like, here's another nutritionist that's just telling me that I can't have my favorite food and this sucks and I hate dieting and blah, 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 this pessimistic thing. But if I can flip the script and get you to a place where you say, actually, I love myself so much, I would never knowingly put something toxic into my body. You can just walk right past that Pepsi in the grocery store like it doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Hyper-palatable, ultra-processed junk in my life, it's no different if I walk into a real estate office and there's a bowl of plastic fruit. My brain immediately goes, not food. This is what my brain does in the grocery store. If I'm walking around a grocery store, 99% of the time, the code that's running in my brain is going, not food, not food, not food, not food. Oh, here I am at the meat section. Here's a grass-fed steak, food. Here's a sweet potato, food. Here's a banana, food. You see what I'm saying? That's the place we want to get to. If you love myself so much that my standards for what I will accept are very high, and I get the best of the best, and that's it.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, you have just given us so much information, and really, I could sit here for hours talking. So, Justin, you got to come back on and we'll talk more. But before we wrap it up, what's one piece of advice that you would give to everyone listening, no matter where they're starting?
Yeah, I would say the shorter the window of time between you hearing something that can change your life and you taking action on that advice, the shorter you can make that window of time, the more profound the changes you experience are going to be. So a lot of people will listen to a show like this and they'll have these moments where they're like, wow, Samantha just said something that resonates with me so much. And oh, and I need to fix that thing. And oh, he just said this thing about Whole Foods. You know what? I've really been wanting to do that. And then the podcast turns off and they go about their life. Take action immediately. If it's nothing other than you DMing me on social media and getting a free foods list, or DMing Samantha and saying, hey, it really resonated with me when you said this thing. How do you put yourself first as a mom, and how can I get started? I'm sure I speak for both of us when I say we're happy to help.
Yeah, for sure.
So just if this resonated with you in any way, don't ignore that. Don't just let this fly in one ear and out the other without taking action. Like, change something.
That is a great place to end. Yes, please reach out to either of us because, it's Justin, you have a plethora of knowledge that, as I said, I could listen to all day long. But we are going to end it right there. Another episode of The Running Blind Mom. What an incredible conversation. Justin, you dropped so many truth bombs today. And I know our listeners are walking away with a whole new perspective on nutrition, wellness, and how we talk to our kids about food. So thank you again for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And if you love this episode, hit follow right now so you can never miss another one. And do me a favor, take 30 seconds to leave a review on whichever platform you are listening to this episode on. You can follow me on Instagram at @therunningwindmom_. And Justin, where can the listeners find you?
On all social media platforms, my handle's the same. It's at Justin Nault Official.
Perfect. And I will link all of that. So thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, you are strong, you are capable, and you are all amazing. Until next time, keep running, keep sipping, and keep embracing the joy of parenthood. Cheers. And I will be back next Tuesday.